Once again, thank you all for joining me today on today's CoolCare Masterclass, where we'll be looking at managing your rotas in CoolCare. As I'm sure you're all aware, CoolCare is here to make operating your care home easier, more efficient, and more profitable. And today we'll be looking at that, seeing how we can do that via our rotas in the system. Now, if anyone does have any questions at any point as we're going through today, you can use the Q&A option on Zoom to ask any questions you've got. You should find a little Q&A option on your Zoom bar. From there, you can ask a question to our team, and a member of our team is on hand to answer any questions you've got as we're going through. And we'll have some time at the end after we finish to have some time for questions as well in that once everyone is all done. And we'll do our best to answer any all questions you've got on what we'll be looking at today. Well, what we are looking at today is, our rotas, looking at our management of our rotas in CoolCare, looking at how we can help manage it for our staff members in the system. So looking at stuff like our staff budgeting with the rotas, how that all works, actually adding our staff, removing them from the rota as well, that kind of thing. And then also looking at, covering shifts and stuff like that as well. And seeing how we handle the rotas with the stuff like position changes as well from that, and how that all feeds into the rotas on here. So, yes, I'll gonna go onto my demo system and we'll show you what we've got. Like I say, any questions anyone does have going through, use the Q&A option under there, and a member of our team is able to help you out with any questions you might have on our rotas. So if I just open up CoolCare on my system and show you that, here we are. So let's see, what we'll be looking at today is specifically under our staff section, the rota under there, which is our live rota on CoolCare as I think about it. If I click into it, you can see it'll load up, showing me today's date, and currently it's all empty. I've got no staff members on here, and we need to fill it in. So that's the first thing we're going to be looking at, how to actually get our staff members onto our rotas. And there's two ways we can do that. Depending on how your rotas kind of were initially created in CoolCare, you may have some with set repeating shift patterns, or you may have some which are just more kind of individual shifts that need filling in one by one. But to assign people onto that, it's kind of two ways of doing it, depending on the two ways of setup. For example, the repeating shift patterns I've got to the very top of my rota on here has kind of set repeating patterns for people. To add them on, you click in this staff column on the left-hand side where it's currently empty, as you can see. If I click into that, it brings up this box telling me the shift pattern, what shift pattern this is for. This is for a senior carer I've selected on my system. And to assign someone onto the shift pattern, you first have to choose a start date, when the person would start on that shift pattern from. I'll click into that. We've got our options on there. And we can backdate that if we need to. We can plan it ahead in the future as well. But I'm just going to do it from today's date to get people on there right now. So if I say our start date is today's date of our first shift for them. And then it'll bring up a list of any staff members on your shift, in your system that will be able to do the shift pattern. So for example, these are all the senior carers I have set up in my home here. And you can see that just their name and the tick box to say this is their main role on their staff record. If this was an extra position for them, they just wouldn't have that tick there, but you could still assign them to the shift pattern either way. The main thing with shift patterns is the staff member needs to have contracted hours on their staff record in order to be put on a full shift pattern. You can't put bank staff on repeating shift patterns on here. So if you don't see anyone on that list, it may be because they're bank staff rather than contracted. But from there, you just click on the person you want, it'll highlight them in blue, and then you can click the button there at the bottom, assign staff, to save that, which will assign them onto the rota. One extra thing it will do, as you can see this box that's popped up on here, is it will tell me this staff member actually has some authorized holidays that would clash with 2 shifts after today's date. All that means is they have some holiday booked in on the calendar, and it's not going to put them on those shifts. So if I click OK to that, we can have a look and actually see that one of those shifts is tomorrow, Thursday the 29th. And if I scroll across from here, we might be able to find the other one there in a week's time on the 5th of June. So if you are using CoolCare for the calendars already, and you've got holidays booked in on there, it will take that into account when you are putting people onto the shift patterns. And so I can do that a couple more times to get the rest of them filled in. So I'll do my other senior here. Once again, just choosing the start date. I'll do it as today's dates. And then we can see there that Amelia, who we put another shift pattern, is already assigned to another one, so we know not to put them on both. Instead, we can pick someone else and click assign staff to assign them onto there. And so I'm going to do that a couple more times just to fill up the rest of those. This time now going to my care assistants rather than my seniors. Again, if I choose a start date, this time I'll bring up a different list of staff, being my regular care assistants rather than my seniors. And again, a tick if this is their main position or an extra position for them. but it works very much the same way. You just pick the person you want, click Assign Staff, and it will pop them onto the pattern, one by one on there. So we're going to do that a few more times just to fill out the rest of those. And you can see how all the shifts get filled in, turning blue to say they've been assigned the staff member on there. You can easily spot them through that. So if we do these last ones on here, that will then have all those people assigned. So that means now all those shift patterns have been filled in as those repeating patterns on there. Now, one extra thing to be aware of with this is it should pop their name in this staff column on the right-hand side. Sometimes CoolCare doesn't do it right away, but if you just reload the rota by just refreshing the page, going out of CoolCare, going back into it, we should then see everyone's name assigned against each shift pattern, so we know who is working on what. So we can see those people assigned to the set patterns in there. Now, as well as that, we can take these people out of the shift patterns if we need to as well. So if the staff members assigned to a pattern but actually said they're no longer doing this pattern after a certain date, we can end that shift pattern assignment for a person just by clicking on their name where they're assigned to the pattern. It'll bring up this box again, the shift pattern term is for a senior carer. And now with the assigned staff and a start date, you'll get an extra box in there for an end date to say when that person would stop doing that shift pattern from. And you can choose your end date or whatever it needs to be. So it might be actually, this person actually only working on the shift pattern for the rest of this week up until the end of June, for example, or end of May, I should say, even in there. So I might pop it as the end date as the 31st of May, say that's their last shift is the 31st on there. And if you just click the assign staff button to save that, we can see straight away on there that that's has taken them out of the shifts after that date. So from the 1st of June onwards, they're not on that shift pattern anymore. So you can see those shifts are unassigned, and we'll need to look at finding cover for those in a bit. And there's a couple two extra options actually on the shifts patterns themselves. If I click into them again, which are these two options up here, covered and history. So the covered option here is if you need to assign temporary cover to a shift pattern, you can do that through here. So imagine if someone's got, say, a long-term absence, a long-term sickness, or something like that we need to add on there. If they're on holiday for a week, we want to assign someone to cover that entire week on there. We can pop it on. So we might assign someone to cover this shift pattern temporarily from, let's say, the 1st of June we'll just do it for a week up to the next Sunday, the 8th. So if I then click again on the name that's currently in there now, because they're still assigned to a shift pattern as of today, and then use that covered option there, we can then choose the date range we want to assign someone to it for, by say, we'll do it for that week, the 1st to the 8th of June. And then that'll bring up a list of staff that can cover that shift pattern temporarily. And that'll include all the people that have this as a position on their record, including these ones in blue are actually pool staff from another home within my company that I can choose to cover it temporarily if I wanted to as well. I'm going to go with Carol here, click on her name, and then save that. And it just puts them on those shifts temporarily in that dates on there. So you can see from the 1st of June up until the 8th, they're assigned to those 4 shifts in there. But after that, they're still unassigned from there. So it's just a way of assigning temporary cover to a shift pattern rather than having to go through each shift individually. You can assign them all in one go from there. But of course, we can still also assign staff to shifts individually as well, rather than having to do it through the shift patterns. Any shifts you have that are unassigned, for example, like if you've got holidays for people that we need filling in just on an individual level, or if you build your rotas to be more flexible rather than using set patterns, just a line of shifts that need filling in one by one, we can click into those shifts individually and it'll bring up a list of staff that are able to do that shift on that day. And again, this is all based on how the staff record's set up, if this is their main role for them, but it will also include if they're pool staff from another home in the company, if this is an extra position for them, and if they're bank staff as well, they'll be able to be selected for the shifts on an individual level. So you can see again a list of seniors I could choose from either my home or another home as pool staff as well. And with that, we just again click on the person we want to assign to it, and it pops them onto that single shift. So rather than assigning someone onto something in the long term, it's just putting them on a one-off on there. And that'd be kind of how you handle your more flexible rotas if you've got them built up like this line here. This is just a 7-day shift pattern with, a shift that needs filling in every day of the week. Of course, that wouldn't be a repeating pattern for one person because I doubt they'd be interested in working 7 days a week. So instead, we can click on the individual shifts there and choose the one to cover it individually instead. So just by clicking on a person, you can see some details for each staff member as well. As you can see there, their name, again, a ticket is their main role, if they're pool staff, if they're bank staff, a contact number, Even if they've got anything else going on that day, such as a holiday, absence, training from a calendar, or if they're already assigned another shift in there. And even if you wanted to message them, which we'll actually come to in a later date. But from here, we can just click on the person on the shift, and it just assigns them into there on the individual. So if you do have more flexible rotas that don't have set patterns, you would just go through the shifts one by one, adding your staff members on there to fill them all in. As easy as that. Now, as you do that, you might notice one thing at the top has actually changed on my rotas, which is this color coding here. And that is our budgets. So when the rotas are initially set up in CoolCare through the rota setup side of things, a budget is set based on the number of shifts that are assigned in there. Well, I shouldn't say assigned, that are actually just created in that. To say these are a number of shifts we need filling in on any given day. And as you fill in those shifts, you can see that color coding will go from red to green. So the red meaning we're under budget, we've not got the right amount of shifts filled in, we've got an unassigned shift on there, or it might have been deleted that's no longer required on that day. But it will show that, 4 shifts were originally planned in from my setup side of things, but only 3 of those shifts are assigned. And you can see there 36 out of 48 hours assigned on there as well. Essentially, if we've got any gaps in the rota, the budget will tell us right away on there. Where it's green, it means we've got all the shifts filled in. So yeah, 4 out of 4 shifts filled in, 48 hours used. Essentially, we're all good on those days. And you can spot that budget right away in the rota. So immediately when you load up the rota, it first load up kind of everything with everything collapsed on there. But you can easily see the color coding on that, so you can easily spot where we have gaps in the rota that need filling in. Whether that's from just shifts we haven't filled out yet, or where we've got gaps that need, adding in with staff members on there. One additional thing we've actually assigned those staff as well is if I click into the shift on here, there's an additional option to cover a shift with agency instead. So if you can't find a regular staff member to do a shift, if it's short notice cover, if someone's called in sick and we can't find someone to do it quickly on there, we can instead bring an agency to cover that shift instead. Just by clicking the button there, covered by agency. It brings up this box here, assign that shift to agency, and we can fill out the details of those shift of the agency that's doing it. So the name of agency and reason for agency, these can be customized on CoolCare through your lookups in the system. So you'll have a list of agencies you would use, as well as reasons for using them. That'll be your own set list on your system as well, done through the lookups in CoolCare. We can say what we're doing it. It might be short notice cover, for example. We can type up the name of the person covering the agency. If we know who that is, we can pop their name in there. We can say who they're covering for. If it's someone that was off sick or on a holiday, we can fill out details of who was doing that shift originally, just based on your staff members there. And any extra notes you've got, you can pop in on the notes box on the right-hand side. And as the box at the top says, this will then create a record in our agency ledger in CoolCare, which is a separate section to keep an eye on those shifts that have been assigned to agency. So if we save that, that will assign that shift to agency, and you can see quite clearly as well that sticks out where agency is being used, brown compared to blue, so we usually know where agency is being used on my rota. But it still counts towards the budget being filled in the same way as adding a regular staff member on would. You've got plenty of options for adding staff onto the rotas and ensuring that you've got the right amount of staff on there. Once people are also assigned to these shifts, we can change around our rotas and move things around as we need to. Just by clicking on a shift that has someone assigned to it, you'll get these 4 options: change staff, swap shift, unassigned staff, and delete shift. And through these options here, you can kind of manage the rota to ensure it's kept up to date with any changes to your staffing, and ensure that all the shifts are kept up to date as well. So for example, this agency shift I've just put in here, actually a staff member has come across and said they can do it now, so I don't need the agency in there anymore. I can click on that shift and use this button here, change staff. Clicking that button there just takes us back to this box here where we can then choose who's doing that shift instead of the agency. So it's just changing the name in the shift from one person to another. Now I can just choose my staff member, and that will just change the name of that shift in there from agency to Warren in this case. And a little box popped up there that you might have just missed that says that shift has then been cancelled in the agency ledger. So the agency ledger will then mark it as cancelled to say that one's no longer going ahead. So you can easily change who's assigned to a shift on a one-off from there. You can also swap 2 people around. If 2 people agree to swap their shifts and you want to update the rota to reflect that. So it might be, say, 2 people on the weekend, the Friday and Saturday, have agreed to swap their shifts. You can click on the first shift you want to swap and use the purple button there, swap shift. I click that. That then brings up this box here, and it will ask me to find the other shift to swap them with, which we can do by filtering it by the date of the shift or by the staff member's name, or you can use both in there to narrow it down. I'm just going to then brings up any shifts they'd be able to swap with. And click on Julia here and say they're going to swap those two around, and use the swap shift button down at the bottom to swap those from there. So they can see they're swapped each other around. The names are now covering each other's shifts. They've been swapped on that side. The other option you've got is to unassign staff. If you need to take someone out of a shift, you can unassign it from there just by clicking the orange button. And that just removes that person from that shift to say they're no longer doing that shift on that day for whatever reason it might be. That's And last but not least, you can also delete the shift to say it might be a shift that we no longer require on there. Or if we need to change something about a shift, say, for example, edit its timings, we'd have to delete the shift to then replace it. So let's say this shift that I've got for tomorrow that staff members Lauren's covering, actually she said she can do 8 while 8 rather than 7 while 7. So we'll have to delete that original shift to replace it with the new one. So if I click on the shift there, we can then use the delete shift option to get rid of it. Tells me there, just a confirmation, make sure you want to delete this shift. That's all fine. The staff will be unassigned from it, but it doesn't affect the rolling shift pattern. So it's not going to upset anything in the long run as we do the change there. So if I click delete shift on that, removes just that one shift from that day there. Then to actually replace it, we can click into the gap we've got just by clicking into that space. And we can then add in a new shift. So any gaps you've got on the rota where you need to add in extra shifts, you can click into them and add in a brand new shift on each day. And this could either be one of the regular shift times that'll be set up in the background on your system. So you again might see different options compared to mine. But you'll also have in here the option to make an ad hoc shift. So if there's something out of the ordinary that's being done that isn't, something you'd regularly do with staff members, we can instead pop it in as an ad hoc shift. I say, for example, this person might just be starting and finishing an hour later. So you can then pop that in there, add that shift in, and that assigns it on there, as you can see. From there, it's just an unassigned shift that you can click into and add a staff member onto from there. So you can pop Lauren back into it. As easy as that. Yeah, just anything you've got to say, the live rota is all about those small changes you can make to staff members, well, to the shift specifically, but the staff members to cover all on there. Now, one extra thing I'm going to show you as well is what happens with the rotas when a staff member has a change of position. So if a staff member has a change of their role, we can update the rota to reflect that once again. And well, the rota will update automatically, I should say, and then assign a staff member from there. So let's take Courtney here, for example. Let's say instead of a care assistant, she's actually going to become a senior carer within my home from, let's say, the 1st of June, for example. So then means we can put her on that senior carer shift pattern that we have currently unassigned. So to do that, we'd first go to the staff record to change their position. So if we click on the staff record section on here, we can find who we want. So we'll go with Courtney in this example. And from there, to change their staff, to change their position, you'd go to HR and positions and history on their record. Click on that, takes us to this page here. And from here, we can insert a new change position. So when you're changing someone's role from a certain date, you need to insert it as a new change to say when that's taking effect from. So if I click insert on there, we can fill out our details. So the position, what that's changing to. In this case, we're going to change it to a senior carer. The date effective of that change, we're going to do it from 1st of June. And then all the extra details you can fill out, so their hours per week, contracted hours, etc. And this will kind of rejig their whole entitlements as well. That's so we can pop in the details on there. But the big thing is, once I save that, this box will pop up, telling me that their timesheets and more importantly, their rota is going to be affected by this change. The main thing being, as we see there, Courtney will be unassigned from any shift patterns and shifts associated with a care assistant after the 1st of June, which just means it's going to take them off their shift pattern that I had them assigned to after that date there. I'm happy with that change, so I can say yes to that. That's fine. And then this staff member is going to be a CD carer as of the 1st of June. You can see on the system, the regular, they will still say they're a care assistant for now because obviously it's not the 1st of June yet. But when that change does take effect, it will change the position in the staff list there. But for now, that means on the rota, we can actually plan ahead. So if I go back to my rota now, we should see on here a couple of things. Firstly, from the 1st of June, Courtney has been unassigned from their shift pattern automatically. You can see on there that she's been taken out of it with that. But that also means I should be able to assign her to a senior carer pattern from, in this case, the 13th of June, when that temporary cover ends. So if I click on Nadine's name currently, where she is currently still assigned to a shift pattern, if I click into her there, we can add in the start date. So we can pop in a start date to say when someone will be picking up this shift pattern from, which in this case we said was Friday the 13th of June. and we can add in Courtney because she's a senior carer as of that date. We can actually assign Courtney onto that shift pattern from then. Quick assign staff to save it. Of course, the senior carer will stay, shift pattern will stay assigned to Nadine from today up until the 1st of June. But from the 13th of June, it will then change the name in there to Courtney's name when she's assigned to that shift pattern and say she's carrying on that shift pattern permanently from there. And if you ever need to check the history of those shift patterns to see who was assigned to what shift pattern between what dates, you can always click on the shift pattern name there and click this history button. If I click that, it will tell me the assignment history of that shift pattern, who was on those shifts between those dates in there, and you can update and change those dates if you would need to as well to adjust that history in there. So you can always check the history of a shift pattern to see who was on it between what dates in there, and I say adjust those end dates as required. So it might be actually in this case, Courtney's going to actually continue on the shift on the regular carer shift pattern until Friday the 13th, so that she's covering the regular shifts before the new shift pattern takes effect. And I can do that, as I say, just by clicking on her name here, using that history button there, and just adjusting that end date ever so slightly. Actually, I've realized I just can't do that because she's not actually a care assistant as of those dates. So do excuse me on that on there. I wouldn't be able to assign to those shift patterns. That's if you did need to actually do that, we can use you can use extra positions in CoolCare, which I'll actually show you quickly. We can do on that. If I did need to assign to those care assistant shifts temporarily to cover it, we can just use the extra positions in CoolCare using the positions and history option on here to add in an extra position as a care assistant from there. So it might be, say she can work extra shifts as a carer from the 1st of June, which should then give me the option on there. Fortunately, it doesn't look like it is because I think she is still a care assistant as of right now. So that's one thing to be aware of as well. I can only make that change and add in the extra position once the date of that change has taken effect. So as of right now, I'll say we do have that shift pattern unassigned, but we're aware of it on here. As I say, my rota budget will keep me aware to know that that shift pattern is currently unassigned, but I can make those changes or add in temporary cover from there, as we've seen it with the options we've got on hand. So you've always got plenty of options on your rotas on CoolCare to ensure they're kept up to date with changes to your staffing and covering stuff as required on there. But yes, that is our rota management. And that will be what to show you for today. So I'm just going to go back to my presentation just for a couple extra things to show you before we finish up. When it wants to, I can share my screen there. So, in case you weren't aware, you may be entitled to some free training on CoolCare. Every customer will have at least 2 30-minute sessions you can use for any part of CoolCare. Anything you want training on, you can get in touch with our team, and you might have some safe training available to use, or of course, you can always purchase more if you want additional training on the system. Anything you think of, our team can do some training with you, whether that's online, via Zoom, or in person as well. If you just email us, training@coolcare.co.uk, we can pick up those requests for you, or you can phone us as well, 0113 385 3853, and a member of the team will be able to take that request as well. But the only thing left to say then is thank you for joining me for today's masterclass, and I hope to see you again next time in a couple of weeks for our next one. We're actually picking up from here, where we'll be looking at our staff portal and messaging to kind of see how that fits in with the rotas for finding shifts for staff members to do. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A. We'll stick around for 5 minutes or so just to answer any of the questions people have using the Q&A. So thank you all for joining.